I simply can't do another show opening rant on why Roto is better than head-to-head. You guys don't want to hear it, and you're going to start tuning me out on it. But I do think everyone should just try a free Roto League next year and see how it goes, and I will just leave it at that. You guys know why I'm bringing this up. Inopportune rest days. Here's the thing. Okay, so I do have one little rant, and this is going to end up in a lesson learned at the end of the year. Although I don't know that we can necessarily use it as a lesson learned because it's too much planning. But I know a lot of folks that are extremely cognizant of two things in their head-to-head drafts. This is actually really important, so don't tune me out here because it's a Dan Vesper show opening rant. Two things that are pretty important in head-to-head drafts that I probably haven't paid enough attention to in the past. Number one, playoff schedule, because historically it hasn't been that big of a deal. Sometimes there's like one or two teams that has a 2-game week mixed in. This year, there's like 6 or 7 teams that have 2-game weeks blended into their playoffs. That's a lot. I don't know why it ended up that way this year in particular, but it did. So maybe pay a little closer attention to playoff schedule. I know the counter argument to that, which is one that I've made for many years, is you got to get there first. And if somebody has a bad playoff schedule, it likely means that they played a ton of games before that point. So they were kind of out in front of the league. So if you have like, a mid-rounder who is 2 or 3 games ahead of some other one over the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season, that's useful. You can try to make moves mid-year, maybe before everybody else is kind of keyed in on playoff schedule. The other thing that folks are cognizant of that I think I do pay attention to, and I bring it up during draft time plenty. I don't bring up playoff schedule all that much. Like I'll admit that we don't go over that perhaps as often as we should. But one thing that we do talk about is the risk of a tank. And, going into this season, you knew the Spurs were going to be tanking. You knew the Rockets were going to be tanking. You knew the Pistons had a really large opportunity to tank. Although, if Cade was healthy, maybe it's a little bit of a different monster. But all these teams that were pretty low down and didn't get the first overall pick. That was the reason I didn't think Orlando was going to tank, is that they just got the number 1 pick. So I think teams feel weirdly greedy if they get a number 1, and then they're like, oh, by the way, we're going to just keep on losing. We're going to get number 1s forever, which is what Philly did. And, people called it the process, and it became extremely polarizing, and everybody hated it, and some people loved it, and so on and so forth. You just don't want to be the team right in the middle of those crosshairs. But one thing that I don't think anybody is talking about right now, or maybe a couple people are, I admit I don't pay attention to everybody else's writing and pods and what have you, so it's possible that I missed it, is nowadays, not only do you have to pay attention to what teams are tanking, you have to pay attention to whether or not the teams you have players on are playing against tanking teams. And in my opinion, it's just too much. But like right now, yesterday and today alone, as you look at the schedule, and there are guys that are rest worries, this is when they surface. The Cavaliers is a perfectly good example of this. They were in Charlotte for 2 games in a row. Donovan Mitchell took the second one off because they're playing against a bad team on a back-to-back. And there's Philly tonight. That's the game that the Cavs wanted to focus on. The Lakers. Big game against New Orleans last night. They won it, much to the delight of myself and other Lakers fans. But now they're in Houston against a tanking team. So Anthony Davis gets the day off, even for a team that is in the brutal thick of a playoff run. And I frankly don't know how you keep track of this, because if you, at the beginning of the year, next season, I don't know who it's going to be. We'll see who gets Victor Wembanyama. That's going to be a team that's probably no longer tanking. There might be a club that pivots into a tank. Whatever it is, at the beginning of next year, we come up with 3 or 4 teams that we say, these teams are almost definitely going to be tanking in mid-March. And then you got to go back to your schedule and say, okay, well, which of these contending teams has a back-to-back with a tank team in the back-to-back? How in the ever-loving crap are we ever going to figure out who to draft again? So I would say try Roto, modified head-to-head league, definitely at IL plus. That's something that I've needed to do myself. By the way, Trey Lyles did just get suspended. I thought for sure with Brook Lopez not getting suspended that Lyles would be kind of the same thing. Trey Lyles suspended a game, which is just so hilarious that he's a guy I've been kind of counting on in my 30 deep league, and now he's going to miss a ball game when they finally had a good scheduling week. I mean, this is just it's too much for my addled old brain. But anyway, that's my rant. There's just too many things to try to take into account right now. You can do the best you can of avoiding tank team guys, but ultimately you're going to end up picking up some of those dudes at some point during the year. Just try not to have them as your top dudes is probably the way to do it. And if it's possible, try to avoid a first or second round pick in head-to-head that has a 2-game playoff week. Which, again, I know, hard. Denver has a 2-game week next week. What are you going to do? Not draft Nikola Jokic first overall? It's too much, man. We need to find a new way. Welcome to the show, everybody. This is Fantasy NBA Today, the simulcast edition, live on YouTube and available on all recorded streams. I'm your host, Dan Besbris, DANBESBRIS. If you want to follow me on social media, some of you have, some of you haven't, most of you have, I guess. It's a pleasure to find you over there. I'm still trying to do as much as I can on Twitter here down the stretch. There's just not as much right now rest of season stuff. We're very much into the part of the year where on the Roto side, and I said this yesterday, but I'll say it again. On the Roto side, you're looking for the lava hot, super high upside 1 or 2 game mega streams. And on the head-to-head side, you're looking for the guys that are playing a crap ton of games in the fewest number of days possible. There just aren't really formats right now where you need the guy playing the rest of the year. Well. Okay, let's dive on in. We got a pretty decent-sized Tuesday card to recap, so I don't want to waste any more time. Cleveland, in their infinite wisdom, rested Donovan Mitchell, and it worked out just fine. Karis LeVert slid into the starting lineup. He had another one of his more efficient ball games, and if he does that, then you can sort of overlook the bad stuff. It's just you kind of don't know when you're going to get the bad Karis. This was a good opportunity, though, for him because it was against a really bad defensive team. So maybe we keep an eye on that. I don't know how many horrible defensive teams Cleveland's playing the rest of the way where Mitchell or Garland might sit in the ball game, but just keep an eye out. They got Houston in like a week and a half. They got Indiana a week after that. These are teams that aren't playing a whole lot of defense right now. But otherwise, it's frankly too late. And Cedi Osman, who cares? For Charlotte, Dennis Smith Jr. slid back up to 32 minutes. This is despite the remaining healthy regulars actually being in the lineup. Mark Williams is kind of the only guy that isn't in there right now. And that, to me, doesn't have a huge impact on whether or not Dennis Smith Jr. is getting more minutes. It does have a little one because P.J. Washington is getting some center minutes. And so if Mark Williams and Nick Richards are there, that forces P.J. into a couple extra power forward minutes and Gordon Hayward into a couple extra small forward and Oubre down to shooting guard and so on and so forth. So that does potentially put a little bit of a squeeze on DSJ, but to me, he still profiles as a silly season kind of victor in all of this, where if we can get through, you're not going to add him in head-to-head right now because Charlotte is right into a 1 game in 5 days stretch right now. But after that, they go 4 times the week after. And, Dennis Smith Jr. could have a really huge week that week. On the Roto side, if Charlotte sits anyone at all right now, Dennis Smith has a massive top 50 kind of upside. At the moment, he probably hovers more in the 100 range with everybody playing, everybody that's left at least. But just sort of file that in the Rolodex and take it day by day. When is Charlotte playing? Then you deal with it when you get there. As far as head-to-head stuff goes, we'll talk about that during the streaming part of the show. But 1 game in 5 days, almost everybody is expendable on that club right now. Detroit got spanked, but I got to tell you, my Corey Joseph ad, which in the moment I did it, and then I was like, damn it, I should have gone Isaiah Livers. Phew, went the right way on that coin flip. Corey Joseph, 2 big ones to start the week. Livers is hurt. Jaden Ivey's still in protocols. Detroit plays in a couple of tomorrow. They play Denver tomorrow, and then they got a couple days off, and then you can kind of rethink things a little bit because they go into a 2-game week next time around. But, keep rolling. Killian Hayes is rolling. James Wiseman played 31 minutes in this ball game. It's important to note that Jalen Duren had 3 fouls in 4 minutes in the first half. So he got his usual 12, 13 minutes after halftime. And I think in most days, you're going to see this as pretty much a split minutes, almost right down the pipe. Both of them schedule play type guys. Neither one is one that I'd fully trust in Roto right now. Maybe that changes if they start to alternate who's playing what day or who starts if Duren moves out into the starting lineup. But right now, that's where it sits. Rodney Magruder played 38 minutes, and I think it's best to leave that alone and just see if anybody comes back for this team. For Washington, Beal and Porzingis, huge games, no surprise there. DeLon Wright had another really bad one. He still got low to mid-20s in minutes, which is kind of what you expect out of him. But he's resettling now in that second unit. Try to hold DeLon Wright in Roto if you can, even if you want to bench him for a game or something like that. Try to hold on. They'll need him more against some of the teams coming up. Cleveland's a good team with very good guards. Sacramento's a team coming up with a really good guard. I think you'll see DeLon Wright bounce back in those ones. Although I get it, with 2 days off before those games on the head-to-head side, you might be tempted to try to move on. I think I would try to hold in almost every format on DeLon Wright. 2 games the rest of this week. If you make a move, the best you get is a 1-game bump. And I don't know that the guy you're picking up is going to be good enough to warrant that. Compared to get to this game by DeLon, then I get it. But the overall package, Wright has the edge there. Deandre Gafford, big game, but only 22 minutes. I think he probably profiles as more of a schedule type of play. Same story for Denny Avdia, Monte Morris, Corey Kispert. Those guys are all schedule plays. They don't make my Roto cut. Denver lost again. Now, admittedly, Denver's been much better at home than they are on the road. So this one you can chalk up to that a little bit. But right now, they're not rebounding. They're not playing any defense. The Nuggets are kind of floating. They're going through a slump at the wrong time. But if they can pull themselves out of it before the playoffs begin, then great. Everything kind of goes back to as it was. I don't expect to see any changes for Denver on the fantasy side. And similarly with Toronto, they're going to go real heavy on their starters. Toronto's starting unit right now is actually pretty damn good. It's that they have no depth at all. Every time the bench comes in, teams either make a run or take the lead. You saw it with the Lakers. You see it here with Denver. But the starters carried the day again. And then Gary Trent, because of that, has moved into a schedule play as well, which head-to-head, you need to hang on to him. Toronto still has 3 games left this week. Roto, I don't think that you necessarily need to. Franz Wagner didn't miss any time for Orlando. He played 28 minutes in this ball game, which took a little bit of the shine off of a Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs 4 games in 6-day stream. Those guys are dudes you're still going to hang on to because 3 games the rest of this week is very much worthy of your attention, but they're just not going to have that massive upside unless we see somebody rest for Orlando in the Los Angeles back-to-back over the weekend. That's a possibility. Gary Harris would be the most likely dude to get one of those days off, and that'll give Suggs and Anthony a pretty good-sized boost. So roll with that one. For San Antonio, they're just rotating which guys play in different ball games. This was obviously the front end of a back-to-back, so keep that in mind. But, Zach Collins, Charles Bassey blew out his knee. He's done for the year. Collins is not expected to play in the back-to-back. We'll see if they have to adjust that. Given that they don't really have a true backup anymore. But, whatever. I don't think they care that much about that. I think they'd rather keep Collins healthy and make sure that they can lose their next ball game because they won this one by accident. Jeremy Sohan played in this one, so he'll probably skip the next one. Devin Vassell played in this one, so he'll probably skip the next one. Keldon Johnson and Trey Jones skipped this one, so will they play in the next one tonight? Keita Bates-Job, Devontae Graham feel like the guys that'll probably play in all of the ball games right now. And that's relatively useful news because those guys were pretty good streams coming out of yesterday. Spurs also have a 4-game week next week. Same thing, Tuesday through Sunday. So just kind of roll with that. Sohan had a huge ball game here. Typically, he's more of a head-to-head type of play. 3 games out of Collins, Vassell, Keldon Johnson, probably Trey Jones. And again, this is assuming they play the remaining 3 games this week. They might not. 3 games out of those 4 guys, to me, is more than enough for a start in any format. Sohan's the one to me that's kind of on the bubble there. And then Bates, Jop, Graham, those are the guys you're looking at. You're like, okay, well, if I can get 4 games out of this dude, that's a head-to-head play, but not so much a roto. Lakers came out of the gates and just blew the doors off of the Pelicans. They led this game by almost 40 points at one juncture and then pretty much stopped trying for about a 12-minute span. Pelicans made this thing sort of a ball game again, and then the Lakers were like, nah. Let's dial this thing back a little bit. Malik Beasley, you knew there was going to be a heater game coming. You just sort of don't know what day it's going to be. It was this one. Maybe he keeps it going here against a bad Rockets team. It's possible that he can kind of roll that from one day into the next. Anthony Davis is out for a game. You're going to see a heavy dose of Wenyen Gabriel if he doesn't foul out. You'll probably see some Vanderbilt at the 5. You'll probably see some Rui Hachimura at the 5 for the Lakers. Alperen Şengün, if he plays, he'd be a pretty good load for those dudes. Gabriel, I think, is the only one that would even stand a modicum of a chance. The other dudes would just get pushed around. The Rockets don't really use a backup 5 anymore. Jabari Smith Jr. was playing some of those minutes in their last ball game. That's when maybe you'd see more Rui for the Lakers. I don't know that there's an obvious pickup here because, frankly, I don't know that I trust Wenyen Gabriel, even if he gets 24, 25 minutes, to put up consistent fantasy value. That would, I think I'd rather just roll with the guards that are going to get more usage with AD out. So, obviously, D'Lo, he was in your lineup anyway. Beasley's probably a play. Vanderbilt getting a bump with no Anthony Davis. He'll have to go get a bunch of rebounds in this one, so he probably does get a bump. Reeves gets a bump. Schroeder is a tough one. I think he needs a guard to be out because he's just not the distributor. But maybe they need him to score. I just think that one's a bit more of a coin flip. And then for the Pels, their schedule isn't good right now. They have 2 days off before they play Houston twice over the weekend. That part of the schedule is nice, but you're not doing anything with them today on the head-to-head side. For Roto, Ingram came back, and Trey Murphy continued to play well. That's a good sign for Trey. So keep him going until the wheels come off. Larry Nance saw a bonus run because Jonas Valanciunas was being full-on devoured by Anthony Davis in this game. And just the Lakers taking him out to the perimeter. He couldn't handle it. So they went to Nance. Nance was able to float a little bit better, chase a little bit better. That's not going to be the case every ball game. Games where they need defense more, he'll play more. Games where they need offense more, you'll see more JV. Herb Jones is a play. Josh Richardson appears to be a drop. So he's a schedule play, but New Orleans, like we said, their schedule is not good for like a solid 2 weeks, basically. OKC won again. Told y'all the Thunder weren't tanking. Oh, the Thunder are tanking. No, Shea was in protocol, man. Dude had COVID. Jalen Williams being back is interesting. They're doing what a lot of these other teams are doing, which is they're giving guys days off on back-to-backs, even in games that really matter. Darndest thing. But at least for the Thunder, they have 3 games this week, and they're pretty spread out. They're in Toronto tomorrow. They got Phoenix back at home on Sunday. I don't think you have to worry about their key guys missing those games. So go with the main 3. Lou Dort is more of a schedule play. Jalen Williams is more of a schedule play. And you're not extending it really at all beyond that. Brooklyn side, same general story. Dorian Finney-Smith, Royce O'Neal, these guys are schedule plays. You got the core 4, and that's as far as you go. I tell you, Josh Hart's plus-minus with the Knicks is insane. And I say that at the front end of what I'm about to add, which is you pretty much have to drop everybody. Jalen Brunson, you keep in your IL. Julius Randle, you're probably holding on to. Mitchell Robinson, I know I actually in the pre-show, for those that are listening on the recorded side, in the pre-show, I told one of the question askers, my buddy Brandon, that he's holding on to Mitchell Robinson, but that was only because he has 3 players that have 2 games apiece. I really think that Randle and Brunson are the only Knicks that, in head-to-head, still need to be on your team. They do go into a stretch of 4 games in 6 nights starting on Saturday, but that back-to-back isn't until Wednesday and Thursday of next week. So it's not like that part of the bounce back is front-loaded on their schedule either. If you really want to hang on, you can try to see if you can get to that part of the schedule. But not every game's going to be fun with Portland. Brunson's going to be back, so Emmanuel quickly is going to lose out on some stuff, I would think, by early next week anyway. So size it up. Do you really feel like you need one game out of a Nick when you can get 3 games out of 15 teams? Is any of these guys doing enough in one game that you can't get in 3? I think the answer is no, with the exception. Honestly, I think the answer is no for the entire team. But the reason you're hanging on to a couple of those guys is that if your league continues, you're going to want 3 games out of, a top 50, top 60 kind of play next week. For Portland, Dame came back, but Jeremy Grant was out, and the wheels have fully come off for the Trailblazers at this point. Dame did everything he could, and it still wasn't nearly enough because dude needs help, and he didn't get it in this one. Anthony Simons shot 7 for 20. Ouch. Matisse Thybulle bounced back a little bit, and Trendon Watford played 40 minutes replacing Grant. But Portland's on a terrible scheduling span. They have 2 games over the next full week. Boston on Friday, Clippers on Sunday. Those are the only 2 games they have until next Wednesday. So you can't do anything with them on the head-to-head side. If you get to Friday and you find out that Grant is still out, you could do a Watford, one-night stand, but you're definitely not doing anything with Portland this early in any format. Milwaukee beat Phoenix on the road back-to-back. Giannis played in both games of their Bay Area Arizona back-to-back, and I do wonder if it's because Milwaukee wants to make sure they can stave off Boston for home court in the East. There's really no other reason why Giannis should be playing in both of these games when everybody else is sitting, unless he's just like, all these guys that are sitting back-to-backs are a bunch of wimps, and it's not that hard. I mean, that's kind of what he's saying by doing it. Middleton sat, but you can understand that one. His body's been crushed by this season. They don't want to take any chances there. But with Giannis, they're saying, look, we don't feel like we're taking a chance. So he played, and I know on yesterday's pod, I was like, hey, if Giannis and Middleton are both sitting in this game, you're going to get a Bobby Portis opportunity. You're going to get a Joe Ingles opportunity. Ingles was actually still not terrible, but Giannis playing obliterated all of that potential fun. And then Phoenix, Suns have a little problem right now. I mean, playing against good teams is part of it, but they've lost 3 games in a row. They're now only a game up on the Warriors and Clippers for that 4 spot, and they're kind of back in the pack a little bit. They host the Magic tomorrow, but then the Suns are at Oklahoma City. They're playing hard right now. They're in LA to play the Lakers, who are playing hard. They've got the Kings, the Sixers. That's 4 games in a row that are pretty tough for Phoenix. Without KD, they are missing those extra bodies. Make no mistake, they're missing Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges, because Josh Okogie, who he went on a really nice run right after the trade deadline when everybody was waiting on Kevin Durant to show up. But a lot of that luster's come off. He's still playing 35 minutes, so he still sort of qualifies as a head-to-head level play. But for Phoenix, they actually only have 2 games over the next 7 days. So look, I know if you're preserving moves for this week, you probably wait through their game tomorrow, and then they have 1 game over 5 days after that, which is even worse. You probably move on from Phoenix at that point. Okogie or whoever you might be streaming as a fringy guy. He's really the only one. But, the regulars were fine in this one. DeAndre Ayton had a worse ball game. Foul trouble. That'll do you in. Phoenix, 26 fouls committed. Milwaukee only 15. I know the Suns were complaining about that after the ball game. But if you're looking at DeAndre Ayton and you're feeling worried in any way, that's why he had fouls, dealing mostly with Giannis, who shot 24 free throws, as I shudder watching that free throw tank season continue to roll. Whew, boy. Okay, that's what happened yesterday. Let's pivot into the streaming part of the program. And let's see here. Make sure I can get the right stuff up on the screen. But before I do, it is that mid-show delightful moment where I get to remind all of you guys to get a fantasy pass. I know you're like, Dan, why the hell am I getting a fantasy pass right now? Why would I do that today of all days? Well, it's because you get both baseball and basketball in the Fantasy Pass right now. Baseball and basketball in the Fantasy Pass right now. Baseball, you get the draft guide, including Joe Orico's ranks and a host of really, really cool features right now. The baseball draft guide is stuffed to the brim, and they're still adding stuff. Let me see. How much stuff is in there right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 21, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 27 features in the draft guide already, and adding with baseball still 2 weeks away. So if you're coming up on your fantasy baseball draft, that's the place to get started. We've got dynasty ranks, you got dynasty prospects, you got ranks by position, you got sleepers, you got busts, you got new faces in new places, you got player dilemmas, the decision matrix, you got players that are 1 year too early. And if that doesn't do it for you, you get the in-season baseball content as well from all of these amazing, amazing baseball analysts. And if that doesn't do it for you, you get premium Discord access. I know we've got a free side open, which is fun. The free side is fun. But the premium side is where you can ask questions of the pros day and night. And all of this is available in the Fantasy Pass for just $5.99. Many of you have asked me on the side, Dan, is there anything that we can do? Well, obviously, continue to spread the word, likes, retweets, all that stuff, subscriptions to the YouTube page at Sports Ethos or at youtube.com/Sports Ethos. But if you want to go one level higher, $5.99 for a Fantasy Pass. You can cancel it after 1 month if you don't like what you're getting. If you love it, keep it. It's the same. It's less than all of the streaming TV services. You know what I would say to do here? Cancel one of your TV services for 1 month. Get our Fantasy Pass, and then you can flip it after that month if you want. I know I personally turned off Apple TV back in August when I was like, you know what, I'll turn it back on when Ted Lasso and Newsroom and whatever else they've got going on. They've got a few things on Apple TV I want to watch now. But you know what? Between August and March, what is that? September, October, November, December, January, February. I may have missed a month in there, but I saved at least 6 months worth. I can dump that into the Fantasy Pass right now. So do that with me. I know it's a little bit of work, but look, you're supporting Sports Ethos, you're supporting the baseball division, and you can bug me in our premium Discord and the rest of our awesome pros if you've got fantasy basketball questions as well. And I threw the link up for the YouTubers. That's the baseball draft guide landing page, which you can see without a subscription. So you can kind of see everything that's in it right now and what you'd already have access to. If you guys want the link to go get premium, I'm going to try to put it in a few places. For the recorded folks, I'll try to throw it in the podcast description. So that'll be in the marketing copy underneath the show. And for those on YouTube, for that up in the chat room right now, that's the buy page if you want to go get a Fantasy Pass today. Okie dokie. Streaming time. Here we are again. Streaming time. By the way, Kyrie Irving, as I'm just about to pivot into the streaming time, says that it is not looking good, quote, not looking good for him to play tonight, which is basically what I said earlier in the show, because they've got a free square on the board. So why rush him in a game they're pretty confident they're going to win without everybody? Because the Spurs accidentally won yesterday. You can bet their butts they don't want to win again today. And then I get these other questions. They're like, well, whatever, like bottom three, they all have the same odds. Yes, that's true. But if they get pushed back by a lower lottery team bumping up into the top three, the team with the worst record, the worst pick they could have would be 4. The team with the second worst record, spot they could have would be 5, and so on and so forth. So there is still some intrinsic value in having the worst record in the NBA. Spurs have 18 wins. Pistons and Rockets each have 16. So San Antonio needs to guarantee that they lose a couple games here coming up, or they then lose the ability to make a run at like 4th as the worst pick that they get. You want 4th over 6th. If you have that option, all you have to do is tank a little bit better. Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about streaming now. Because today is today's a weird day where you've got a decent sized card and you have a lot of options. So if you remember on yesterday's show, I talked about how you could wait through the Charlotte and Knicks games on Tuesday before abandoning ship on Wednesday. So this was a day that if you had Hornets, who, again, I would say you probably need to hang on to Terry Rozier. I think you probably need to hang on to Kelly Oubre because he is a usage vacuum right now. Dude had 28 points again yesterday. And then Rozier, he's in turnover hell at the moment. But to me, those two guys have top 50 or higher potential the rest of the way. And then Charlotte's schedule gets a little bit better after this week. Gordon Hayward, PJ Washington, Dennis Smith Jr., you want Nick Richards, all the way down the board. All of those guys, to me, you don't need to hold on for a 1-game and 5-day stretch. And we just talked about the Knicks earlier in the program. Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, to me, are the only Knicks that you absolutely must hold through to next week. Everybody else, in my opinion, is droppable on the head-to-head side. So this was a day where if you had players on those two teams, you should have basically been grading out, I'm going to make moves on Wednesday. I don't know if you have one, if you have two, whatever it happens to be. The nice part is you have a truckload of options of players that go 3 times the rest of this week. That gives you a 2-game roster bounce. Because remember, that's what we're always trying to do in these streaming discussions is get 2 extra games played per roster move you make. That's how long streaming works. You want +2. That's what you're hunting on. But that's easy. Because as we talked about yesterday, there are literally 15, half of the NBA, 15 teams that play 3 games between today and Sunday. I do want to take one moment to highlight the Sacramento Kings. Now, I know that they don't have the world's greatest options because Trey Lyles just got suspended. Does that mean that, Kessler Edwards is going to get a little bit more playing time? I don't know. But someone like a Malik Monk is a glorious play right now because the Kings actually, not only did it go 3 times the rest of this week, they go 5 times the next 7 days. That's the optimal schedule zone in the NBA. It doesn't get any better than that. 5 times in 7 days. They're going to be gassed at the end of it. They got 2 days off, and then they have another back-to-back after that. 5 games in 7 nights. That takes your long stream all the way through next Wednesday. It's really nice to be able to not have to worry about a roster slot for a full week and know that you are getting the most number of games played over those 7 that you can possibly find. That's beautiful. Unfortunately, they don't have that many streaming options on the Kings now with Lyle suspended, but that's a team where you need to kind of start your hunt. Beyond that, if you want to give yourself a little more flexibility the rest of the week, you could look at the teams that don't only have 3 games in 5 nights, but have 3 games in 4 nights, because that would give you the opportunity to make a move on Sunday if you had a roster move left. I personally don't think I will have one on Sunday because enough of my guys are getting hurt this week, and enough of my guys had 2-game weeks that I kind of needed to get out earlier. And, I'll probably use my last move on Friday or Saturday. But if you want to go 3 games in 4 nights, you have a bunch of options there. Those teams are, and I did a tweet on this already if you want to see it written down, Boston, Chicago, Golden State, Memphis, Minnesota, Philadelphia, Sacramento. 6 teams go 4 games in the next 6 nights. There are a lot, actually, of streaming options on those particular ball clubs. There's a lot of juicy ones. Chicago has guys like Caruso, Patrick Williams, Patrick Beverly. Golden State has guys like Kevon Looney. Jonathan Kuminga's due back tonight. He'll be a streaming option. Houston, I'm still worried that Jayshawn Tate doesn't play in their back-to-back over the weekend, so perhaps their options aren't quite as good there. Memphis, David Roddy's been playing better lately. If Dylan Brooks got dropped, he would be a head-to-head level stream. Minnesota, not as many there, but if Naz Reid is back, he would be one to look at. Philly, you've got DeAnthony Melton as a possibility there. And then Sacramento, as we mentioned, not much left. But you're looking at Chicago, Golden State, Houston, Memphis. There are a few names on those clubs that would make a lot of sense in a 4 and 6. If you're going 3 and 4, Boston creeps in there as well. Because Al Horford's going to sit in one of those games. So you could look at a big man. Probably not that many other things you're doing there as, if you tack Boston onto that list. Houston is the team that has their back-to-back over the weekend, so they don't go 3 games in 4 nights. I apologize for saying their name. They are a 4 and 6. I was flip-flopping how I was reading things. Boston is a 3-4. Houston is not. So fix that. I was reading the 4 and 6 instead of the 3 and 4. But I personally don't think you need to go 3 and 4 because you probably have enough roster slots available or moves. You're probably using up enough moves to where, this gives you the half of the NBA. Teams that I didn't list there that you could still play with. Denver, although they actually go 3 and 4 starting tomorrow. Houston, we just talked about. The Lakers still have 3 games the rest of this week. The Heat have 3 games. They go today, Saturday, Sunday, in kind of a super weird scheduling twist. Orlando still has 3 games this week. Spurs, we just talked about. Toronto still has 3 games this week. There's a billion teams. That's true. It's actually a billion. There are a billion teams you can pick from that still have 3 games this week if you wanted to make a move in that direction. The only other way that I would do it is if you had somebody lost to injury where they either where they either weren't very good or the injury is longer term. So Charles Bassey is an interesting example of that. Someone that we all picked up, or some of us picked up for their 4 and 6 stretch starting yesterday. He got hurt 8 minutes into the ball game. So he's looking at a 0 the rest of the week. So you have to get off of your zeros. And that type of stuff happens every night. You might have another player tonight that goes down, that then you're staring down the barrel of a 0 the rest of the week. That's why you need to save moves through till Thursday or Friday, because these players that have 3 games, if they get hurt and you're at the risk of losing 3 games, you need to get off of that. And I know there's this built-in desire to use a ton of moves on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, but you leave yourself no flexibility at all. Because, by Friday, it's a little easier to make the argument to use up all of your roster moves. Because then if somebody doesn't play over the weekend, probably you're only losing 1 game. Maybe you lose a guy that has a weekend back-to-back. You lose 2. That sucks. But it's not like having somebody go down on Wednesday, losing 3 games or something like that, where if you had a roster move left and you could get off of that player, you could move to someone who has 3 games. Let's say you lose someone. Let's say someone on your team plays like 3/4 of a game tonight and then gets hurt, and they still have 2 games left the rest of this week. You're losing 2 games if you have to squat on that guy. But in addition, the ability to get off of that dude who had a 0 and get on to someone who still has 3 games left or even 2 games left, that's a 4 or 5 games played swing. That's why having moves available for guys getting hurt is so important. You can turn a 0 into a 2 or a 3, but the swing from the injury, you have to kind of put that in your head as well, because you had game planned for a certain number of games that are then going away. It's also the easiest way to get a +2 or a +3 in a roster move is to replace someone who was a 0. So I would say, in a worst case scenario, make sure you still have 1 roster move left after today. Please don't use them all up on a Wednesday, even though this is a day where you want to get off of a bunch of 2-game guys. If you need to use up your last roster move on Thursday, I sort of understand, but I don't like it. And then if you need to use it up on Friday or Saturday or Sunday, obviously Sunday, then I give you my blessing on those. And that is your long streaming discussion for today. Folks, on the recorded side, this is where we pivot into the Q&A part of the program. I hope you'll join us on YouTube for a show coming up. For the YouTubers, throw your questions in the chat room, and we will get to those in the next 20 seconds. This is Fantasy NBA Today, a Sports Ethos presentation. Go get yourself a draft guide as part of a Fantasy Pass and hang out with me on the NBA Premium side as well. I am Dan Vespers, at Dan Vespers on Twitter. Please do check me out over there. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Drop a 5-star review on the pod. All that stuff that we blitz through at the end of the show. Just do it because, it's the right thing to do. And we'll talk to you guys tomorrow. So long for now. All right, YouTubers. I'm going to send a tweet out on that it's Q&A time. So if you're still here, if you're hanging out, throw your questions in the chat room while I take 6 seconds to send this sucker out. There we go. Oh, righty-dighty. My mother says. All righty, daddy. Not that many questions today compared to previous days. Maybe they'll roll in as we're going here. That's fine. I got a ton of other things to do. I didn't get a chance to walk the dog this morning because it's raining outside. Dylan, I told you were first up at the end of the show. Are you new, Dylan? I hope you're new. I love it when I see new faces here. Firing up Devontae Graham versus Dallas. I assume that's a roto take since you're debating whether or not to sit or start. But my answer is probably. Let's find out who's sitting for the Spurs and who's playing. I think we'll see Keldon Johnson back. Maybe we see Trey Jones back. But Branham is a question mark. But Sohan, Zach Collins, who the hell else played for San Antonio that might not? Vassell, if those guys are all out, you probably see at least 25 minutes of Graham. So head-to-head, likely yes. Roto is a maybe. I think you kind of have to be hunting threes and assists and not worrying about your field goal percent. Drop Malik Beasley after today for Gary Harris's 3 games. No, I hate making drops for one extra ball game on a week. No, also Gary Harris is probably going to sit one half of the back-to-back. So hard no, Jared. Hard no. If you have a Laker, ride him out. They got a good schedule this week. 3 games in 5 days is good. And they play on Sunday. If you're going to make a move, drop someone who's not playing on Sunday because then you'll know what you're attacking. You'll know who's in and out. Also, Gary Harris is going to sit a game, so you're probably going 2 versus 2. Finals this week. Use 2 pickups out of 3 due to injuries. Bassey just getting hurt last night. Any 14-team streaming option, 2 or 3 games left come to mind. Just would want to avoid high turnover, guys. I wouldn't do anything now if you only have 1 move left. You got to hang on a little bit. Hang on, Eric. Save it. Save the move. Someone gets hurt, you're going to want that move to avoid a 0. If they don't, do it tomorrow or Friday. Do you think DeAnthony Melton plays all 3 games Philly has in the next 4 days? I do, actually. He's played in their recent back-to-backs. I know every once in a while they sit him in it. At Charlotte, at Indiana is the only reason that becomes a question mark, because that first game, especially against Charlotte, is sort of a possible tank zone. I think the answer is yes, because he hasn't missed a game since the All-Star break. Obviously, I can't know for sure, but I lean towards yes. They don't think Roto is challenging and are not interested in things being easier or less problematic. They enjoy chaos. Okay, so that's just... okay, understand... Okay. Liking chaos, I don't agree with it, but that's a fair assessment. Head-to-head over Roto, there is more chaos. It is less problematic. There's no question about that. It is not easier. You are playing it wrong if you think it's easier. Roto is equally challenging for very different reasons. Namely, if you try to punt and you screw it up even the tiniest bit, you're done. You're done. There's so much strategy in Roto. I would argue more, frankly. Because head-to-head, you're like, I'm just going to be really good at 5 or 6 categories all year and maximize games played. Can't do that in Roto. New Mark Williams update. Is he a drop? New this morning? I didn't see anything this morning. I know last night they said he was without a timetable. So, yeah, basically. Yes. Yeah, he's a drop. Jordan Clarkson, Keldon Johnson, John Morant. Who would you stash if you got a bye week next week? You have a bye next week? That leaves 2 weeks left in the season. You have a 2-week playoff? Yeah. I mean, it's Ja, because he's the best of the bunch. Especially if you're punting free throw percent and turnovers. It's Ja. You hold Ja. Keldon Johnson is going to play intermittently. I actually think he's going to be a huge headache because of it. And then Clarkson, bleh. If you're punting field goal, Clarkson becomes more interesting. But we're the best combination of threes and blocks or separately for the remainder of the week. I was thinking Beasley and Isaiah Jackson. I have a total of 3 ads left. I mean, we might see Miles Turner in the Pacers' next ball game, and they still don't play for what? Play tomorrow, Saturday? Yeah, 2 games over the next 5 days. I mean, obviously, if Miles Turner's out, then Isaiah Jackson is a monster. Beasley's a solid threes stream. Like I said, there's 15. Half the league plays 3 games the rest of the week. There's plenty of options here. Patrick Williams could get you a little bit of both. Patrick Beverly could actually get you a little bit of both. Let's see. Who else plays 3 games that could get you both? Bruce Brown. Jonathan Kuminga could get you a little bit. David Roddy has been hitting some threes. Mo Wagner could potentially. I mean, he does more steals than blocks. D'Anthony Melton, weirdly enough, he'll get you some blocks and threes. They got 3 games the rest of the week. Spurs. Devontae Graham for threes. He's been blocking a couple shots lately in a weird twist. Gary Trent will get you some threes if he got dropped. There's a ton of options. Not as many on the block side, but anyway. Drop DeLon Wright for Alex Caruso. 2 games versus 3. You guys know I want a 2-game bump if I'm making a drop. I'm not doing it. That's a no for me. Best stream today for points, free throws, and steals. Is it Jaden Hardy or Josh Green? I'll go Josh Green. Would you keep DeLon Wright or go for Caruso, Beverly for steals this week? Well, that's the thing. I want a 2-game bump for any move that I'm making on a Wednesday. Dropping DeLon Wright's not going to give you a 2-game bump. I like Beverly for his 3 games in 4 days coming up, but I need it to be a different drop somehow. Unless you just have a copious number of drops that you can throw at whatever. Anyone you think that can have had an underwhelming season that has a good chance to bounce back next year? Oof. Oh, man, I got to say, I haven't looked that far ahead. Tyrese Maxey is an interesting name, depending on how things go roster-wise in Philadelphia. Brandon Ingram, who barely played this year. Some of the Spurs young guys, if they get a high draft pick and maybe don't tank as much. I could see Mike Conley. He's like 110 right now because of some weird little stretches. I could see him getting back into like the 80s. I just don't. There isn't like a top dude that I liked that I think is set to return to form somehow. What about in the middle chunk of players? Is there anybody in there that could be better next year? I mean, DeAndre Ayton had a slow start, but he does that every year. Jakob Poeltl's rolling now, so that's too late to grab a hold of that one. Honestly, not really. Jamal Murray, but everybody's sort of onto his surge since he shook off the early season rust. Scotty Barnes, there's your guy. Scotty Barnes could probably, he's been pushing up the board lately also. I don't know. I feel like most of the guys that would have fallen into that category have had better second halves. Who's a better option in a points league? Bates Jop or Malik Beasley? Let's go Beasley because he's heating up. In my finals week, I think I'm going to need points to win my week. Should I grab Brogdon and Herter off the wire? If they're on the wire, then sure. Yeah, those guys score. Brogdon probably more so. Dan, what do you think about Josh Green and Jaden Hardy tonight with Irving and Doncic out? I think they'll probably be good. They're going to have to be because they need to win that ball game. I would play them both. The hard part is making an ad because Dallas only has 2 games left this week. So you'd have to get off of them after Friday or even possibly before Friday if either of the stars comes back. Roto, it's an easier call to make because, no moves cap. Oh, I see. The questions came in late. Here we go. Hey, Dan, I have Pope, Mike Porter Jr., Killian Hayes out of bio next week in our championship week. Thoughts on preparing for next week. Should I just use my moves next week to replace them? I'll play to Sunday this week. Oh, boy. Well, Detroit goes on Tuesday of next week. So I think you could probably hang on through Tuesday for him. Denver's tough because they have 2 days off to start the week. It's part of a 1 game in 5 day span. So I feel like Denver Those ones you definitely want to get off of. And Miami's kind of the same thing, too. Sheesh, you'd have to use 3 moves there. And Miami has a weekend back-to-back. Denver has a weekend back-to-back. Yeah, you kind of need to hold them through the end of this week, and you probably need to drop 3 of those 4 guys early. Or if the guys you have on Adebayo, you could probably hold Adebayo through to Saturday and then make a move at the end, potentially. Everybody else, because it's hard to drop 3 guys on Monday. Then you're really going to be low on moves after that. But Hayes, you can hold through Tuesday. Adebayo, you could probably try to hold through the week. Should I keep holding John Morant? He's sitting in my IR. I'm in week 1 of the playoffs, and I'm down like 300. I mean, if he's in your injured slot, then yes, keep holding. But if anybody else on your team gets hurt, then you have to make a call because you cannot take a 0 in the playoffs. Ever. Sorry, Nick. So if Ja ends up having to go, Ja ends up having to go. Just drop the worst of the 2 guys or the one you think is out for longer. 10-teamer. Are these guys holds? Chris Dunn, Matisse Thybulle, Jalen Duren, Josh Hart. Hart has 1 game in 5 days, so no. Chris Dunn has 1 game in 5 days, so no. Matisse Thybulle has 2 games over 7 days, so no. Jalen Duren, yes, because he has 3 games over 7 days. It's basically a 3-game week coming up for Duren, and he's been playing better. He's not a must-hold in a 10-teamer, but if you're running out of moves, then that's why you would hang on there. Otherwise, no. If moves are not a factor, you could drop all of those guys, because between them, they all have terrible schedules or aren't playing that great. Charlie, you're a new name, I think. What's up, Charlie? Welcome. Looks like Kyrie's out again tonight. Would you prefer Hardy or Green? I'm going to go Green. I think he's more efficient. But if you're looking for just straight, like, all the volume stuff, then you probably go Hardy. For 9-cat, I go Josh Green. I'm leading in blocks and rebounds, but only 5th best in field goal percent in my Roto League. That sounds like somebody who might have like a JJJ or a Brooke Lopez or a Miles Turner or something like that. Oh, no, sorry. I read that backwards. I'm lacking in points, assists, and steals. Should I abandon my big men and play all guards in my utility spots moving forward? Probably. Especially if you can find a guard that's not a terrible field goal percent play. Yeah, I mean, you're at that point in a Roto season now where you're going ROI. You might have to bench a guy who's a top 70 player to get someone into your lineup who's just better at the categories you're stat hunting. I have a free spot on my squad because of Anthony Davis and Kyrie injuries, but I got 1 move left for the week. Should I add Josh Green or add another guy with 3 games or don't make a move? I think you probably have to not make a move. Well, no, because if you're talking about just a straight-up open roster slot, then you probably add someone with 3 games. Oh, yeah, well, AD will be back. This is just a tough one because AD is going to play the games on Friday and Sunday. I think Kyrie probably plays their game on Friday also. Yeah, okay, so this is interesting for you. You can pick up the red hot streamer. You don't need to worry about 3 games because AD will definitely be back and Kyrie might also be back. So you're almost definitely going to have to drop someone and you might have to drop 2 someones. So go with the player that's a super hot, 1-day stream, or go with the Sacramento back-to-back or something like that. Because you're going to have to make a bunch of drops on Friday. That's intriguing. Melton or Jaden McDaniels? Rest of the week for 3s and stocks. Give me Jaden McDaniels. His minutes are safer. Roto is definitely not easier. Yeah, Rami, you're right. If the league is even slightly competitive, if you have a real games cap, it's one of the most difficult formats to compete in. Correct. Strategy is through the roof, man. In Roto. I do love a good Roto question. Get off of schedule stuff. Would you drop any of these players to pick up any of these? The potential drops are John Collins or Zach Collins. I'm assuming that's John. Daniel Gafford, Tyrese Maxey, or Isaiah Jackson to pick up Josh Green, Santi Aldama, DeAnthony Melton, Austin Reeves, or Matisse Thybulle. Yes, I would try to get a game out of Josh Green and Roto tonight. I think it's worth it. I think I would drop either Collins or Gafford because those guys are not locked into minutes. Isaiah Jackson is the one that would fall the hardest off a cliff, but also the biggest upside if Miles Turner misses any more ball games. So with Roto, you're just hunting 1 game upside. And right now, Collins has almost none of that. Gafford has not a ton of that. So I'm probably dropping John Collins to play a game with Josh Green, and then I'm probably moving on to another interesting Roto stream the next day. And that is the chat room, and we are done. Hey, not as many folks that tuned in today. That makes me a little bit sad. That's okay. Oh, Sammy Bars asked drop Brunson. I wouldn't if your league continues to next week. I mean, you're talking about a top 40 play that that level of player is someone that you're going to want on your team the following week, or you're going to get smoked. Now, if you can't keep him in your IL, it's sort of a different beast, I guess. You don't want to take any zeros, but if we think we're going to get one game out of him here, then you kind of hold on. If it's zeros and you're getting killed, if you can't stash him in an IR, then you might have to. For those who may want to try a Roto League next year, any rules or rule changes you'd recommend? Oh, yeah, I'm glad you asked. This is a fun one for me. Make your life easier because the game itself is extremely challenging. So what I do is 3 forwards, 3 guards, 2 centers, 2 utility. No strict positional stuff. And then set the game's cap at like 85, 86, something like that, so you can play your bench a little. Not too high, because injuries will completely destroy your season at that point. You'll fall way behind in games played. But also not too low, because you want to be able to actually play more of your dudes. I like to have the waiver time extremely short, because on Roto, there is no penalty for adding and dropping guys. The penalty is only if you play them in your lineup. So set the waiver time to 1 day. Set the trade wait time to 1 day. And then don't punt on draft night. If you happen to end up being really bad at something, you can kind of soft punt it middle of the season. But attack all of the stuff. Go best player available. Try to get all the good stuff. You'll make your decisions mid-season. And then by mid-season, everything you're doing is based on your ROI, return on investment. You don't have to worry about schedule. You don't have to worry about when players miss games to injury. Obviously, you still prefer guys at the top of your Roto draft board that are relatively healthy. As you get later into a Roto draft, you can take big swings at guys that might miss the entire season hurt. You can also pick up guys on tanking teams if you think they're going to have a really good first half of the season. Just because that all goes into your bucket. Best weekend back-to-back streaming options for a points league. All right, the weekend back-to-back teams are Denver, not very good streaming options. The Clippers, so Eric Gordon, Mason Plumlee, Terrence Mann creep into the mix. Miami, Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, Kevin Love, Kyle Lowry, who probably sits one of those back-to-backs as an option. Orlando, that's probably the best one for streams, but a lot of those guys are going to be added already. But Suggs, Cole Anthony, Mo Wagner, all interesting weekend back-to-backs. And then Toronto would just be Gary Trent Jr. All right, done for real this time, guys. Thanks, everybody. Like and subscribe, please, before you close your window. Please hit one of those buttons or both of those buttons. Bye-bye.